Hello, Lions. In this video, we're going to talk about fractions, decimals, and percents. And we're going to practice converting fractions, decimals, and percents in between one another. So what I mean is things like our first question, where we're going to be turning decimals into percents. So I'm going to do the first two, or I'm going to have you do some as well. So first, they want us to go from decimals to percents. And you can see that I have decimals here. Now, to go between a decimal and a percent, all we are actually going to do is multiply our decimal times 100. That is the same as moving your decimal 2 places to the right, because times 100 really means times 10 squared. And remember, this little 2 as the exponent means move your decimal to the left twice. So all you're going to do is take your decimal and move it 1, 2 spots to the right, and now you have your 48%. I'll do it one more time for this one. 0.08, also known as 8 hundredths. If I multiply it by 100, also known as moving your decimals 2 places to the right, 1, 2. Now my decimal's behind the 8, and I have a 8%. I want you all to go do this one on your own, this 2.56. Realize you will get a percentage that is above 100%. You will get a big percentage. So go ahead and try it. All right, if you did this one correctly, you just would have moved the decimal 1, 2 times. And as I told you, you're going to get a big one, 256%. So that's easy. Turning decimals to percents, you just move that decimal place to right. For this next problem, we're going to go down on your sheet of paper. So go down, don't go right, go down. And I'm going to show you how to turn a percentage into a decimal. Now, to do a percent to a decimal, we, instead of multiplying by 100, we are going to divide by 100. And to be honest, that's what the word percent actually means. Percent actually means divide by 100. But realize dividing by 100 is the same as moving your decimal 2 places to the left. So right now I have a 97%. And even though you cannot see it, there's a decimal all the way in the back. If you don't see the decimal, it's all the way to the right. Now we're going to move that decimal 2 places left. 1, 2, and now my decimal is in front of the 9. 0.97. And that's all we're doing. Let's go try 9%. So once again, my decimal is right behind the 9. I'm going to move it to the right, to the left 2 times. Once. And now I'm out of numbers, but I'll move it one more time, 2. And remember, we always put a little 0 in this empty valley. So this becomes 0.09. And I'm going to go back and put a 0 in front of my decimal to make it correct. I want you to do this last one, 125% on your own. Now remember, even though you can't see it, our decimal is right there. So go ahead and give it a shot. What did you get? All right, if you did this problem, you would have moved the decimal to the left 2 times. 1, 2. And now the decimal is in between the 1 and the 2, making this a 1.25. And that's how we turn our percents into decimals. Now, once again, when we go down to the next box, we're going to go down to the next box. And the next one is a review from way long ago, turning fractions into decimals. To do a fraction into a decimal, you're just dividing. Fractions are actually just division problems. This 3/4 is really just 3 divided by 4. This 1/8 is really just 1 divided by 8. So to do this, you're going to take your number that's up top and put it inside your long division. Put the number that's on the bottom on the outside. Now ask yourself, does 3 go into 4? No, it doesn't. So what we're going to do is we'll add a decimal here, and we'll add a decimal there, and make this a 30. Does 4 go into 30? 4 does go into 30. 4 goes into 30. 4 times 5, 6, 7. 7 times. I had to think about that one. 7 times. 4 times 7 gets us 28. So now we have the problem 30 over 28, and we'll subtract them. 30 minus 28 is 2. We have to keep bringing down zeros here until we get a final answer that completely stops. Now we have 4 and 20. How many times does 4 go into 20? 4 goes into 20 5 times. 4 times 5 is 20. So we'll get 20 minus 20, which is 0, and we finished our problem. We ended up with 0.75. Now, I'll do this one again with you. I won't make you do it on your own. Here we have 1 over 8. So we'll put 1 on the inside, 8 on the outside. Now, 8 does not go into 1. So what we'll do is we'll put a 0 and a decimal down, and we'll add a 0 behind there. 8 does go into 10 one time. So I'll draw a 1, and now I have to do 8 times 1, which is 8. Now I have 10 over 8. I'm going to subtract them, and I get 2, and I'll bring a 0 down. 8 does go into 20. It goes into it 2 times. 8 times 2 is 16. So now I have 20 minus 16. 20 minus 16 is 4. I'll add a 0, bring it all the way down. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 8 times 5 is 40. And if I subtract those, they end up getting 0, meaning I'm finished. So we ended up with 0.125. So it's important to remember how to turn fractions into decimals. Remember, we're just doing our old friend, long division. And we'll practice this more in class if we need help. Now let's go all the way back up to the top to solve our next one. So our next one gives us the same fractions we used before, and they want us to turn these fractions into percents. So what we have to do when you turn a fraction into a percent, you got to first convert it to decimal form and then turn it from a decimal to a percent. As an example, we just did 3 divided by 4 on the last problem, and we got 0.75. Now, all we have to do to turn it into a percentage is, if you remember, if you look at our very first box, move the decimal to the right 2 spots. 1, 2, making it 75%. So I want you all to pause it and try to see if you can do 1/8 on your own. Remember, we just solved 1/8 and got it as a decimal a couple seconds ago. And when we did that, let me erase that real quick. We got 0.125. Go turn it into a percentage on your own. All right, if you turn it into a percentage, remember, turning into a percentage just means move the decimal 2 places right. 1, 2. We ended up with 12.5%. Now, I bet a lot of people are confused because there's a decimal inside of our percentage. That is fine. Percents are allowed to have decimals in them. All right, our next one is my favorite, a percentage to a fraction. So here we have a percentage, and we got to turn this percentage into a decimal and then into a fraction. All right? So what we're going to do is 97%. Remember, move your decimal to the right, to the left 2 times. 1, 2. That gives us 0.97. Now, there's a few ways to do this. You could think of the place values, and you could realize that you could say, hey, this is 97 hundredths, which would look like 97 over 100. Or you could do it this other way. What I do is I take the number 0.97 and I put it on top of 1. Now it's a fraction. The only problem is there's a decimal in the fraction. We can't have that. So if you take this decimal and you move it over to the right 1, 2 times, now it's a 97. But the rule is whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. So I'll move the decimal on the bottom right 2 times, and that becomes 100. 97 over 100. Here, once again, I have 9%. If I have 9%, remember, take your decimal, move it to the left twice. 1, 2. Now I got 0.09. Once again, all you're going to do is take that number, 0.09, and put it over the number 1. It's a fraction, but we have a decimal in the fraction, which we don't want. So we'll take our decimal, and if I move it over twice, 1, 2, it's now just 9. I got rid of it. I got to move this decimal down here over twice. 1, 2. I'll fill those over the zeros, and I got 9 over 100. And I'll do this last one with you. You don't have to do this one on your own. 125%, remember the decimal is right there. Move it left twice. 1, 2. And now it is 1.25, which is correct, but we got to turn it into a fraction. So I'm just going to say 1.25 over 100, over 1, I'm sorry. And to get rid of the decimal, I got to move it over. If I move it over twice, 1, 2, it now disappears, and it's 125 on the top. I got to do the same thing on the bottom. 1, 2. I could fill those in with zeros, and it's 125 over 100. Now, this problem can be simplified. 25 goes into both of these numbers. So you got to simplify if you can. If I could divide the top and bottom by 25, I could turn this into 5 over 4, which also simplifies to 1 and 1/4. All right, the final one we're going to do is decimal to fraction, which I kind of already showed you. I'm going to show you a little bit of the other way now. The final one is a decimal to a fraction. So here we have a decimal. And like I said, you could either think of our place values. Now, if you look at this, 0.06, that 6 is in the hundredths place, meaning that this is 6 hundredths. And what does 6 hundredths look like? Well, that's 6 hundredths. Another way to do it is if you do what I said, take this number, 0.06, and put it over 1. Now it's a fraction, but the problem is that there is a decimal in it. So move your decimal over to the right to get rid of it. I'll move it once, twice, and now it's a 6. I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom, once, twice. Now I got 6 over 100. I would recommend you should simplify this. Both these are even numbers, so you can divide them both by 2. Doing so will give you 3/50. Next, let's do 48%. 0.48, I mean 48 hundredths. So you can realize that this is 48 hundredths using your place value, and obviously write 48 over 100. But I'm going to do 0.48 over 1. I'm going to move my decimal place once, twice on the top to make it 48. I'll do the same thing on the bottom. 1, 2, fill those in with zeros. So I have 48 over 100. Those are definitely even numbers, though, so I'm going to divide them both by 2. Half of 48 is 24. Half of 100 is 50. I still have even numbers. I'll divide them by 2 again. And if I did that, I got 12 over 25. We'll do this last one together. Here I have 0.125. Once again, let's take our 0.125. Let's put it on top of the number 1. For this problem, we'll have to move the decimal over 1, 2, 3 times to get rid of it, making this 125. That's okay as long as I do the same thing to the bottom. 1, 2, 3 times. Fill these in with zeros. Now it's 125 over 1,000. If I go ahead, I can simplify this. If I divide the top by 25 and the bottom by 25, I can get my answer. Simplify. And that would be 5 over, I believe it would be 5 over 40. I can simplify this one more time. I can divide these both by 5, giving me 1 over 8. So that's what we're going to learn so far. We're just switching back and forth between decimals, fractions, and percents, and we'll practice this more often. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you have any questions, please reach out to me.